right, so we're starting our focus on the grades 3 through 6 as we discuss foundational reading and how we can implement it in our classroom and support our students. And so just based on what you have attended, or most of you have attended some of what we've done, what are your reflections, or what you would like to cover in this next portion? What are your needs?
Emily, thank you. First and foremost, thank you so much for doing this training. I know I was just there briefly for about an hour and a half on Monday. So thank you for that. I think understanding a little bit more about some of those phonics, fluency, and reading comprehension, because being in 5th grade resource and stuff like that, sometimes the assumption is that kids may have got this earlier or they know it, but that's why they come to my class. That's why they're in that particular environment, is learning some of those foundational principles. And I think instead of just, for me, creating a lesson plan that has specially designed instruction, probably getting back to some of these foundational reading things or strategies rather, that you have aligned, and that'll probably help me as I go back to the 2nd quarter, 3rd quarter, start teaching them, say, okay, this is what we're doing, but let's spend a day on just our punctuation. Let's just spend a day on, some of those things. So I think that's another reason why I'm here. Like, let's stratify and design my lessons. So each day we're kind of focusing on some of these things, such as fluency, comprehension, and those type of things. So thank you for sharing that. That's it.
Anyone else? Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. All right, so game plan for today and tomorrow. And now, is there anyone who is here today that will not be here tomorrow? So I make sure that I know that going in. Are you coming both days or today?
I may be able to pop in again on Friday too. I've been trying to have a little bit of a fall break.
Break.
What does that even mean? But then I see the faithful 5 here, and I'm like, okay, if the faithful 5 are here, maybe I'll try to make it. Okay.
Well, that's okay. But you know what? I will record. I have not forgotten to record much, so I will record stuff if you can't. So, all right. So today we're going to talk again about phonemic awareness and how it applies to the upper grades, and that, yes, it's still important. We're going to talk about the importance of going from speech to print and how we use that in the upper grades. I want to talk about kind of my overarching position on the upper elementary grades is that I want to respect the person that we're teaching. And I see so much of a need for foundational that disrespects the person. And it's like, okay, well, you need this. So now we're going to take you back to Bob and Sam went, whatever. And then we take them back to a 1st grade content level. And I just think that's so disheartening to students. Like, there is not a student that comes into 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade who is a struggling reader. There's not one of them who sits there and says, yeah, you know what? My self-confidence, I'm good. They all feel that they're struggling. They all hurt. And what we see, right, in the older grades, the older elementary grades, is that a student would rather be bad than dumb. So the behaviors come out because it is a better defense mechanism to be, the class clown or the class jock or the class goof off or the class whatever than to be the class dummy. And you could have had absolutely excellent teachers and absolutely excellent parents that have been supportive and loving and affirming and all of that. And still a child will come into these upper elementary grades. If they're a struggling reader, they still feel dumb. And no one's ever used the word. Hopefully no one's ever used the word, although we know kids can be very mean to each other. But even if no one has ever used that word, that's how a lot of kids feel. And it comes out. And I believe that we have to teach the foundational skills, but we have to do it in a way that respects the person, that says, you know what, you are not a dummy and you are capable of learning at whatever level you're going to learn. You're going to learn, but I'm not going to treat you as if you're a first grader who's starting. So I will not use any material that, you know, makes kids feel like, oh, I'm reading my kindergarten sister's same book, right? Because that just is way too disheartening. So whatever it is we're going to teach, I want to try to find a way to teach it using material that's more appropriate for that grade level and says, helps them feel confident along the way. So that's my philosophy of going through. And I know it's counter to a lot of OG programs that are scripted and say, you follow the program. If the kid is at this level, here's the material you're going to use. And I say, you're right, we have to cover that concept, but let's do it with material that's more age appropriate. So yes, a student still needs to read the word cat, but I'm not going to show them the picture book with, you know, kindergarten picture book to do it. And as soon as I can, I want to get us into where we use age appropriate content in that if I can teach a child the sounds, some of the foundational work, we're going to go into using it with multisyllabic words. So we can use the same content, but we'll do it in a way that reinforces what, you know, their peers are facing. And we want to do it in a way that promotes where they can be, where they, how to best catch them up. So if a child has reached third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and is a struggling reader, we know, because vocabulary, up until third grade, most vocabulary that a child learns is what he has heard orally, right? Oral language. From third grade on, 90% of vocabulary acquisition is through what you read. If they're not reading, they're not getting that vocabulary increase, that vocabulary instruction. And certainly the self-teaching theory that we talked about doesn't happen, and the exposure to more complex syntax and semantics doesn't happen, and polysemy, where, you know, you have multiple meanings of words. Those things don't happen when a child's not reading. So we have to try to figure out how to explicitly teach as much as we can, not just so that the kid doesn't keep declining, but hopefully so that the student is able to close the gap with his peers. And it's a really tough task, third grade and on. It is super tough. It's monumental, because the research all shows that the preponderance of students, if they have not met grade level expectations by third grade, they will not. It's like, I don't know, it's something like crazy, like 90% of them will not reach it after third grade. Don't quote me on that one, but it's a really high percent. So we love to get kids where they should be up in the primary grades, but if not, it takes a lot of work, and it takes concentrated work. And it's easy to get bogged down with, what do I really need to do to get there, right? Because you can't do everything. We want them to gain every subject, every focus, everything that's in our curriculum, everything that's in our enrichment activities. We want all of that for our students. But we have to know that if a student comes to us as a struggling reader in the upper elementary grades, it does take extra time. It takes very concentrated extra work, and we can't do everything, so we have to prioritize. And hopefully every grade along the way, if we all make a little bit more of a boost towards meeting proficiency, hopefully our students don't fall in that 90% who never catch up. But I want to try to give us that framework of working within the students, of honoring their students' age and capabilities and difficulties, and work towards figuring out how we can prioritize. And that's something, right? There's no hard and fast rule of this is what's going to help this child most, because every child's a little bit different. And every situation is different. And this situation right now with COVID and distance learning makes everything much harder for kids. And so it's like, this is tough. This is tough. We've got a tough task in front of us, right? So let's recognize it. And everyone, we're all doing the best we can. And we're all going to learn as we keep going. Because I learn things every day of how to better help students, because every student's a little bit different, and I'll say, oh, okay, I see that this strategy is not helping you as much. Let me try this other one. So we keep learning and we keep looking at the student to see what we can do to help. Right. So
Emily, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just quick question. As you said that, all I was thinking about was some of my students and thinking about the 5 facets of literacy: phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading. Sorry, that's 4. But should each
phonemic awareness is the other one.
And phonetic
phonological awareness is the other pillar.
Awareness. Sorry, these I'm taking these were my notes from the prior day.
Yeah.
But looking at that, should each day focus on one of those subjects?
No.
Okay.
No.
One of those.
Okay. Vocabulary should happen all day long, every day, in every subject you teach, every interaction with the student. The more we model academic English language vocabulary, semantics, and syntax, the more the student is able to catch it. They did not catch it early on, right? And if they're not reading, they are not reading complex sentences with interesting syntax. They're not reading academic vocabulary. So we have to use it. So that happens all day long, every day. There's not a moment of the day that should not be one of the things that we're aware of. Okay. So vocabulary, syntax, semantics, always providing the meanings, noticing connections with words, and we'll talk about morphology more in detail, but always noticing the connections between words, how words relate to each other. And I'll do this down at a kindergarten level, and it can also work at whatever level. It's like, the tell me more, right? Do you do this in your pre-K classes? Tell me more, give me more information. And it's like, wow. And you get kids to talk and you say, can you use that same information and use that with because? Use the word because in your sentence. And they'll say, oh, well, I went to the store because I did, I needed to whatever. I said, wow, you just used a complex sentence. That's incredible. Did everyone hear that? He used a complex sentence. Amazing. You used a subordinate clause. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's all try to use a sentence and let's use the word because or although or however or whatever, so that we're able to, in our conversations, in our oral language, we're able to build awareness of syntax. Because if they're not reading it, they're not getting it. And in most oral language, people speak in phrases. And it takes concentrated effort for us to speak in sentences, right? We have to train ourselves to speak in sentences. And when we talk to our students, how many times do we say, how was your day? And they say, good. We say, okay, good. What'd you do? Oh, went to the beach. And it's like, okay, that was a phrase. Let's put that in a sentence. And they're like, what? It's like, yeah, tell it to me in a sentence, a whole sentence. I want to hear we have to model, we have to give them frames, sentence frames. We have to say, okay, so a complete sentence would be, I went to the beach. Oh, okay. I went to the beach. Okay, you tell me why, or tell me what you did, or tell me what it was like, or describe it to me, getting in more, or what time of the day did you go, and then get an adverbial clause in there, or whatever it is that we're doing, just to get that more idea. So they're not reading it, we have to provide it. And every chance we get, if we can model correct sentence structure, complex sentence structure, and if we can ask them even orally to produce it, that helps them be aware that that's happening, because they're not reading it well, right?
So would you like choose specific vocabulary words to use throughout the day?
Depends if I'm the teacher or if I'm supporting the teacher. If I'm the teacher and I have a curriculum to use, I'm going to support those words and all previous words, like keeping a word wall or whatever you're going to do, and make sure that I'm using that vocabulary ongoing. And then I know, and we all know, writing is difficult for students, every student. And what helps writing become clearer is better vocabulary. And what helps writing become more interesting is the use of interesting sentences, interesting syntax, whether it's, being aware that I'm going to include positives. I'm not going to teach them what positives are yet, but I'm going to use it in my speech. Mr. Brown, my neighbor, the teacher in whatever class, he said this to me yesterday. And as I modeled the use of a positive in my speech, syntax starts to sink in. Or, you modeled the use of clauses where you say, oh, I love chocolate. Oh, but you know what? Because I love chocolate, I gained 3 pounds over quarantine. And you model your syntax and whatever it is. So think of the way your students are speaking, and think of where you want them to go in their writing, and let where you want them to go in their writing to influence how you speak and how you want them to speak with you. So it's for my littles, I would call it, "Ooh, we're going to do grown-up talk today," and it's like, wow, that was really cool, grown-up talk, and or whatever. But modeling it helps. And what I would always say is, if I can't get a student to speak a complete sentence, to be aware that that was a complete sentence in oral language, how in the world are they ever going to write it? Right? So the more I encourage, and so sometimes, in blocks of time, I'll say, okay, every sentence we say during this next block or this discussion time or whatever, every sentence is going to be a complete sentence. Everything we say will be in complete sentences. All right. And so, I might do hand motions and say, okay, I need a little more, and then say, okay, period, because some kids will think, okay, I'm working towards complete sentences, and they do that run on, and this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Oh, wait. Oh, I couldn't remember all that. Wait. Da, 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 da. Stop. Okay, take a breath. What was the next thing? Da, 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 da. Stop. So however we're going to do it, wherever our students are, we want to model what we want them to be exposed to and what we will eventually want them to learn, right?
Emily, so would you suggest, just a few things, would you suggest doing some type of like sentence starters and just working with the students, say, okay, this is how I want it, this is how I want it to be modeled, this is what we should do, or this is how we're going to teach this, or how I'm teaching it, say, okay, this is how a sentence looks. And I think one of the things that I have a few of the students that are these struggling readers and all that stuff like that. And so I got some of those things going on, but I want to show and I want to show their work so we could all work together. Because in the virtual space, it's tough to be like, okay, Sam Sneed, we're gonna work with you and then pull out. But it's easier in the virtual space to say, okay, this is this person's work. Let's look at these certain students and let's do this together so we can work on it just together. I think that's some of the drawbacks of the virtual space, or at least
Absolutely.
where I'm kind of having those hiccup moments where it's like, oh, this is this one person, and the kid doesn't want to feel ostracized, right? The kid's like, oh, like the kid is like, Mr. Ito, come on. I mean, I'm like, I'm like, sorry, I'm just trying to help you. Like, okay, let's all look at this person's whatever it is, you know, just their writing. So I think those are some of the moments where I'm kind of having.
Yeah. So I know. So there are tools that can help us, and we can talk about tools.
Okay.
So just very briefly in tools, we're not allowed to use ClassKick. It's not approved by our DOE. I like ClassKick because I can see everything my kid is doing, all the kids in the group are doing, but they don't see each other unless I allow it. There's Pear Deck. What we are allowed to use in our district is Pear Deck, and Pear Deck can be used. And you can show people's responses. You can have people type in a response to a prompt, and you can show it anonymously. You don't have to put names to the responses. So that one is helpful. But as a quick on the fly, I always like to keep a Google slide deck open, and I assign each student into a Google slide. But then the names are visible, or the names are visible to me. I guess if I thought about it, there might be a way that people don't know who's doing which slide. I guess it's possible to keep it anonymous, but in any case, we could give kids numbers and have them go to their number or whatever and keep it anonymous. But in a Google slide, I don't have to prep anything ahead of time like with Pear Deck. You can prep things and push it out and have the kids sign in. But if I keep a Google slide deck open, we can work in a Google slide deck, and I can see everybody's work at the same time. And address it that way. I just keep a Google slide deck open it in grid view. I know who's on which slide of the grid, and I can see everybody doing their writing. So we can talk more about tools and we can demonstrate the tools, but let's just know the tools exist to help us with that. But as far as your question on should we teach each thing one day, here's the deal. With foundations, it's like a ladder. The goal is reading comp. That's the goal. Everything we do works towards the goal of reading comprehension. We don't say today I'm teaching reading comprehension and I'm not teaching the other things. Every day that we work on everything else builds to improved reading comprehension because that's the goal. If a student is weak in phonological awareness, you have to address it, and it doesn't matter if they're in first grade or fifth grade or an adult. You have to address it. And we know, and I said this, I know I repeat myself and I apologize, but it's worth saying that if that is a problem area for any student, we know now that working towards improving that, almost every student can improve, and almost every student who improves transfers to improved reading. So this is really big. We want to find out, is part of my student's problem phonological awareness? If it is, we have to address it. And I would address it every time I see that student until I know that that student is at pure levels. Okay. And for third and up, that means every student should be solid in identifying sounds, blending, segmenting, and manipulating. So from third grade and up, definitely fourth grade and up, they should be solid at manipulating sounds. So that's where we say clamp And instead of the little, say rrr. And if they can come out and say cramped, then they're manipulating. If they can't do that, definitely fourth grade and up, they need help, because helping them helps reading. So the Kilpatrick books, Heggerty kind of ends at about second grade level worth of work. The Kilpatrick material goes up, takes you to complete automaticity at the highest level. So, but that's working like deleting sounds from a word, substituting sounds in the various positions within a word. That type of manipulation skill transfers to improved reading. So that I would work on every time for a student who has problems, every day. Phonics. If a student doesn't know that, okay, going back to basic information, words are comprised of sounds. That's the phonological awareness, right? The sounds are represented by letters. That's the phonics. And then we have to blend and segment those sounds, and that combines the phonics and the phonological awareness. So those absolute foundational skills, if a student is unable to work at, doesn't have automaticity there, those should be worked on every day. Every day. We can't say, well, I'm going to work on fluency if the student can't read the material. There's no sense. Fluency is a wonderful indicator of whether or not they're decoding effortlessly. But you can't just work on, today I'm working on fluency, everyone try to read faster. That doesn't work. The way we work on fluency is by improving the foundational and modeling appropriate prosody, helping them through difficult phrasing, helping them to understand where to phrase, how to take your breath at your period, how, what your voice does by modeling it. And sometimes, we work on fluency with repeated readings, but when we are working on repeated readings, what we're asking them to do is, are you sure you're decoding those words? Have you put those words now into your long-term memory? Because if you have put those words into your long-term memory, it will come out smoother, right? Which is what we see in fluency. And repeated readings gives you more chances to decode the word and hopefully get it orthographically mapped and stored into long-term memory. So repeated readings are helpful if it means greater exposure to put words, to orthographically map words and place them into long-term memory. If it's just about speed, speed kills.
Yeah, well, Emily, so what I try to do is like I've been doing the past couple of weeks is like on Monday, like we'll do like a time reading for like a minute or so I could kind of understand where the students are at. Say, okay, so I'll go ahead and work on their time reading while the other students are doing whatever reading or whatever lesson plan that I say that they have done. So I try to understand that way, but it's like, after writing it down and marking down on my sheet, I always feel like, okay, now I have that information. And then we're trying to jump back into the lesson. So I feel like sometimes I'm like, okay, should I take the information that I have now from this passage of time reading, then kind of expound upon it and say, okay, these are the words that we all missed, and then kind of draw that out. And instead of hurry up and teach the lesson and be like, okay, because trying to find that connection.
So fluency assessments are useful as assessments, right? They tell us what's happening with the student. We can hear where they're struggling. We can hear whether it's a prosody issue, whether we can hear whether there is decoding issue going on, that they just don't know the word, they don't know how to attack the word. We have to give them the foundational skills. We can hear those things, and the reason we do assessments, right? They are formative assessments. It is to inform us for our instruction so that we are better able to instruct them. So there is so are you using the Wonders the Wonders Fluency Assessments?
I have that available. I've been doing some of this stuff on like reading A to Z because they're a little bit more familiar with that, but that's also standards
Okay.
based.
Okay. So for whatever fluency passages you're using, if we can think about indicating where the student had issue, and it's like, is that is that something we can teach? Are you noticing that they're messing up because they never, they more often read suffixes incorrectly, or if the word has a suffix, they're reading that incorrectly. That's a foundational skill that we need to work on, is how to decode with suffixes, which we'll talk about today. And then, or is it that it's words that have the odd letter combinations? They never quite get the words that have the EA and the EI or the whatevers. Well, then let's teach that. That is an indication to us that that's an area we need to teach. If they don't know how to start at a capital letter and read to a period, that's also something we teach, right? So assessments should help inform us of our instructional needs. There's a program called HELPS, HELPS, that also has free fluency assessments and passages. And there's another one, I can't think of the name right now, that has more passages. Whichever passage you're doing, I like to indicate, breaking down and saying this phrasing here was difficult, and figure out why that phrasing is difficult and working through that. So foundational, absolutely. Every day, if that's what your student needs, is the phonological awareness and the phonics. Fluency, the occasional, assessments are good because it helps inform us what we're supposed to teach. So we work on fluency to help inform our instruction. And we should see over time that fluency improves, right? But foremost, let's let it inform our instruction so we know how to help our student, where the student needs help. Vocabulary should be all day, every day, and reading comp, with the additional components of looking at language structure and inferences and finding the main ideas and similarities and differences. All those things we can work on every day, whether we're in pre-K or 6th grade. And the more we bring the terminology of what we're looking at into our conversation, even outside of the ELA block, the better, the better they're able to internalize the process. It's like, oh, so gosh, I just came in and I'm dripping wet. What happened? And someone says, oh, you forgot your umbrella today. Someone else says, yeah, well, because it's raining and you don't have your umbrella. I say, oh, you know what? You guys made inferences. I didn't tell you it was raining, did I? I didn't tell you I forgot my umbrella. You figured it out on your own. That was an inference. So whatever it is that we're doing, that we reinforce the concepts, helps. Okay. So, which takes us back to foundational, because if there's an issue with foundational, we have to address it. The student is not going to get good reading comprehension. The student will not, if they don't have, I shouldn't say that. It is possible, but it's not likely to have good reading comprehension without really bolstering those foundational skills. I mean, there are odd things that happen when you bring in assistive technology, and we should use assistive technology when appropriate to boost what the student isn't getting. So if the student's not reading, let's use assistive technology so that they can still have that exposure to language. So in that area, we can improve the comprehension. Okay. So Phonological awareness. Who can give me a quick definition of what's happening in phonological awareness? What we refer to? I'm going to keep asking because, you know, the more we produce, right, the more it's bringing it, having us recall and bringing it back to what we remember.
I thought it was understanding the sounds the letters make.
Okay. That's very close. That's actually phonics. When you
interchange them, how to
okay.
switch them up.
All right. Okay, so phonological awareness and phonics, we often get it mixed up. Phonics means you're including actual letters, visual letters. So with phonics, we are taking the sounds and combining it with the symbols that represent the sounds. So you have a letter in front of you. So the second you have letters in front of you, we're really dealing with phonics. The phonological is purely the phono means sound. So phonological is purely the sound of it. So phonological is the sound of the language, the sound structure of the language, words, syllables, compound words, right? And includes the sounds of individual phonemes. So of the big umbrella of auditory issues, that's everything you hear. We have a smaller circle of phonological, so that's the sounds within the language. And then within phonological, we have the smaller area that's the phonemic awareness, and that's the sounds within the actual sounds of the phoneme is the smallest unit of sound. So a phoneme is a single unit of sound. The small unit of sound is the t, the k, the ah. So the ability to be aware of the individual sounds, all those very, very small units, that's the phonemic awareness. So we need the phonological, where we know, what are the words in the sentence? And what are the syllables within the words? And then we need the phonemic, is what are the sounds within that word, the individual sounds within the words. And then when we combine it with the actual letters, then we're going into phonics. So that's an academic issue. And while we as teachers, we want to use the terminology correctly for ourselves, in that we know it helps us talk about our goals. Our goal is to have a student be able to manipulate sounds, to be able to hear the sounds, identify the sounds, manipulate the sounds. And we want them to be able to associate the letters with the sounds. So the terminology helps us. Now, I don't get into that too big with the students. It's like, okay, we're doing exercise. Here we go. The word is camp. Change the k to a d, and I don't have to tell them that that is a phonemic awareness exercise and not a phonological awareness exercise. I don't care. Point is we want them to be able to do it, right? To get the benefit of doing it. So, and some of the exercises I showed where we're using the letters and manipulating the letters in a word with the Jamboard and whatnot. I'm working with phonics because I'm actually working with letters, and I'm trying to improve the awareness of the sounds, but I'm having that visual scaffolding. But my goal there is I'm eventually going to take away the letters and ask if they can do it with just the auditory part. Just with the sound without any scaffolding at all. So 2 goals. Okay. So we talked the other day about using the PAST test, and I don't know that everyone got a chance to look at the PAST test. So I'm going to bring it up again and share it. Share the link, and you can bring it up in your
Emily, I know
Yes.
you're ready to talk about this. I'm sorry, I'm a lot of questions. When I click on the link,
Go for it.
3rd through 6th resources in the Laidlaw Training Foundation, I didn't see anything come up. I saw some stuff when it said additional resources, but on the 3rd to 6th grade, 3rd to 6th resources, it was blank.
Yeah, the 3rd to 6th, that's what we're going to put today's recording and tomorrow's recording. And so I'm saying, no, it's just a work in process. I just started it last night. I've got to get it because I kept trying to put it in, this format and that format. It's like, you know what, just go ahead and put it in a site and it'll work better if I put it in a site because then I know it should be everything clickable.
It's okay. I've been there, as some of my students would tell you, Mr. Rito, when I go there, there's nothing there. It's like, oh, sorry. This is what you wanted us to work on. So
yeah. Okay, so I put a link in for the past test. If you could open it up in the window or however you want to do it, or I'll share my screen. Hello. But I want you to have that link. And I know it's small when I share the screen, so I want you to actually have it. So in this test, Dr. Kilpatrick, he asks for 2 things. He asks for, can you do it correctly? And can you do it with automaticity? Because there's a big difference in saying, yeah, I got it right, but it took me 5 seconds. You're working too hard. We want to get you so your brain is processing these bits of information with automaticity, without any effort. So in the test, he'll ask for correct and automatic. And I can't do the way he asks you to mark things, but make a legend and mark it. So if you can do it the way he says to mark it, go for it. But basically we want to know automatic, correct, incorrect as we go through these exercises. So he doesn't start at the very, very early levels of what are the words in a sentence. He starts at the syllable level and he'll say, as this one, say spaceship. Now say spaceship, but don't say ship. So right now I'm showing you what I might do to scaffold it if someone needs scaffolding, but as we're assessing, no scaffolding. So does a student say spaceship without ship? Do they say space? Okay, if they're automatic, good. And then if we work at, that's a compound word, so those are easier. But then as we look at, say, fantastic, and say fantastic without, and don't say fan, do they say tastic? Or do they say astic? Stick? And are they struggling? And even some of our kids in the upper elementary levels have a hard time with separating syllables. They've not had a good awareness of syllables. In fact, some of our students have a greater awareness of individual sounds and a weaker awareness of syllables. And we want to know that because if that's what the student is doing, we want to be able to address their awareness of syllables. So it has these different levels. Onset rhyme, say feet without f, and do they say eat? And say cone, but don't say k. And this is where it gets tricky because if they say cone and they don't say k, and they sit there and say one, because they're reading the word in their brain and taking off a letter, say, okay, I want you to just listen to my sounds. Just listen to the sounds. Because we want to take them out of the seeing the word and into hearing the sounds. Okay. So that's a really lovely example. And he has many as he goes through the assessments, as he goes through his exercises. But the idea is, are they aware of the sounds? Say sleep, but don't say the s. So that's a deletion. Sleep, but don't say s. And does this child say leap? Or does the child say sleep, sleep? And they're trying to read the word in their head. They say, leap? Well, that's spelled wrong, isn't it? So we want to ask, are they able to process the sounds to automaticity? So sleep without s is leap. Regardless of the spelling, it's the sounds we're dealing with. And it goes through here. They say went, but don't say t. Do they say when? And then we ask them to delete sounds at different positions of the word, or substitute sounds at different positions of the word. Say close, but instead of the k, say they. So that's an initial substitution. We can have a medial substitution where we say cut instead of the say ah, and we can have the substitution at the very end. So we would say cat instead of the t, say d, or whatever. So he has many exercises in his book. Whether or not you use the book, being aware of what we're trying to accomplish is the student able to identify, isolate, delete, and substitute sounds in the various positions. That process, that's the working out at the gym. So when I talked about, the metaphor of if our goal is to play basketball or to play tennis or to swim, you don't see any weightlifting out on the court or out in the field. But doing that allows you to be a better player. So if the goal is to play a game well, doing that weight training allows you to be a better player. This exercise, what we're doing here, that's the weight room work. That's the getting in there and working out your muscles so that you can be a better player. Okay. So I know none of us go around in real life and say, oh, I can do this and substitute sounds. But the process of being automatic in that allows you to be a better reader and speller. It transfers. Go figure, even though our spelling is odd sometimes. So this test is very helpful to assess where our students are. If your students can't even get the first level, we know we need to start back at very beginning levels of just being able to identify sounds in a sentence, words in a sentence, sounds in a breaking apart compound words. And then, the work that we did on Tuesday with the pre-K to second grade group, which we have in the recording. So hopefully our third and up group, hopefully they're at least at this level, but seeing any deficiency, we know we can work on it and we know we can help them to be better readers by giving them this exercise, right? Working out that part of the brain. All right, so you have this resource in the link. He has this free. He has 4 versions of this test that are free to download. He has instructions that are free. He has a free chapter of his book on the site that explains more about why to use this and how to use it. His book is $50. You can use it from whatever grade up through as an adult. It's non-consumable, definitely worth the $50. I've recommended it. The school have some copies because I know that I can take just about any list and work through the exercises now because I've done it enough. But we're teachers, we're busy. If you have a book and you can just say, I'm on this exercise, boom, that makes it easy. I can do this one today. And his exercises, he calls them 1-minute drills because you can pick it up and do a few of them in a minute. And that might be it for that point. And if you do that a couple of times a day, so you're getting repetition throughout the day, over the course of the week, you'll see improvement. My copy of the book is right now living in the second grade classroom, so if anyone wants to go and look at it, you know who to ask. Who has it? All right. So assessing it. Now, how do we scaffold it? The scaffolding here, because not everyone's going to be able to do it right away. And then just as we talked about in the pre-K to second grade group, the art of teaching is finding the right level of scaffolding, figuring out what scaffolding you need for which students, and when you can take it away or change the scaffolding, right? So it's that differentiation piece. So the goal is to be able to manipulate sounds with no scaffolding, just purely as sounds. Most of the time with our older kids, because they've been speaking, so even though they don't know that they're working with sounds well, most of them can get through with a very minimal layer of scaffolding. Some of them require more. So the least restrictive scaffolding that is easiest to accomplish with no tools whatsoever is just by putting the sounds on your hand. So it's like, okay, well, let's identify the sounds. Say the word, let's say, pick one here that's not as, say the word niece. Everyone, let's do this. And if you want to unmute yourself, go for it. Say the word niece. And now let's put the sounds on our fingers. The sounds are n, e, right? Did everyone get our three sounds in niece? N, e, s. We're not talking about letters. We're talking about sounds. Niece. Now I want you to, what was this example? Say niece, but don't say the s. Right? Did everyone get that? It's knee. Okay, so we're working with sounds. We're not working with letters because niece looks nothing like knee. But we're working with the sounds. We're trying to do the weight training for that processing part of the brain that processes sounds and puts the sounds together, manipulates sounds. So first thing, is our student able to identify, just identify the sounds? And we often have to model it because they want to do N-I-E-C-E. It's like, okay, we're just working with sounds. Ready? The sounds are n-e-s, niece. Right? This time, let's change let's change the n to a p. Everybody, I'm going to change the n to a p. So I'm trying to do it mirror to you. So for the student's perspective, it looks left to right, the order that we work with in reading. So be aware that as you're doing this, modeling this for the student, for you, it looks right to left, but you want for them it to look left to right. So niece, so niece. I'm going to change the n to a p. What do I have now? Peace. Right? So we're working purely with sounds. This is something we can do without any tools, without having to go to Jamboard, without having to go to bring your tiles out on the table. This is the easiest type of scaffolding you can do. And it's helpful because when you go to spell a word, if you see the kids say, if they get used to doing that, then they can think about, okay, what did I use to spell the N? What did I use to spell the E? What did I use to spell this sound? So first step in spelling is, of course, identifying the sounds. So this helps, and it can be done inobtrusively. And you teach them to do this, and while we can start it with our manipulation, we will use the same type of scaffolding for spelling, and a kid can sit there at his desk with his other hand on his lap and be doing this on his lap and no one else sees it and he's not embarrassed that he's having to physically identify sounds in a word. So, and I know there's a lot of good programs that give you things that you have to move or things that you have to tap your finger on. How many, or you have to tap your arm on it because we want it multisensory. And now let's tap our arm for each sound. And I can tell you that they work, but no one in third grade and up likes to go around and say, oh, I'm going to spell the word niece and let me tap on my arm the sounds. They don't do it. They'd rather write it incorrectly than be embarrassed. Is that correct? Do you find that too, Ida?
Yeah, I
Right?
was just, I mean, as you were speaking, Emily, I was just trying to think about like, how does that look? You know, how am I going to teach? And, you know, even though we have these different things like lesson plans and objectives that we have to go over, I think that's some of the stuff that I'm getting stuck on, but need to go back and build some of this foundational reading. Say, okay, even though we do have to read this wonders passage, even though we do have to read for this fluency, we need to spend time in doing this. Like, okay, Monday we did this reading on what the passage is. Tuesday, you know, so for me, this is great. So looking at, okay, Tuesday, you know what day it is. Guys, we need to focus on, or class, because I feel like I have just a room of boys now, like one girl in there. But it's like, okay, let's focus on the reading. And I mean, if it's funny, it's funny. If they laugh, they laugh. But the goal is to build their foundational skills. If we read this reading, we did this reading. Now Tuesday we're gonna do these sounds. That's what I mean. I know it's funny, but
So if a student is not automatic in working with sounds and identifying sounds and working with sounds, that should be every day. It really should. And it could be 2 minutes every day, incorporated in your morning time.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, but you want to get it. So it's like when you're training your brain to do things a different way and you actually grow new white matter. They can show you grow new white matter when you go through this. You make new, they call it fiber bundles, and I don't know what that means, but they can see increased neurotransmitters happening and stuff happening in the brain. It's really incredible. But I'm going to ask you to step back and think, what is our long-term goal for this student? Is our long-term goal that they have read this wonders passage, or is our long-term goal that the student is a better reader? And the things along the way should get us to that long-term goal. Hopefully reading the reading passage helps us to our goal. If it takes us away from the things that really do help us to the goal, that's when I would say maybe we don't have to do it, you know, quite as, you know, prioritize the long term. That's what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. And it's just like, we'll, you know, continue on, but then before that, I understand that this is great skills that they could learn while they're continue on to build that foundational. So say, okay, all right, guys, okay, we read the passage. Now let's look at it. Now let's do the sounds that were in there, or let's look at that. So it's still doing this work, but still taking these brain breaks as I'll factor them into the class. We come back and say, okay, take the brain break and let's look at the sound in there. What sound? Because I always try to, because some of their goals in SPED is having them get and understand like the main idea, the comprehension, and focus on those multi-syllabic words. But I think looking at some of the reading and then dissecting that and breaking that down to some of the stuff that you described.
I would encourage that if you find that students are not proficient in phonological awareness, definitely your third grade and up special ed students, that should be written into their IEP. That is a measurable,
Mhm.
attainable goal that has shown a
Mhm.
positive outcome. Uh, as much as much, if not more, than many of the other goals that we write in an IEP. So,
Right.
because if it's in there, then we have to do it, and if we have to do it, we will do what we have to do, right?
Right. And then as you were speaking, I was just I'm listening, but I'm also creating a data sheet for the students. So as I can track, because sometimes it's tough to do in a virtual space. But as you were speaking, I was just aligning and creating a data sheet so I could work with my EA and say, okay, this is how we're gonna break this down. And I was like, okay, let's do it. The sheet will have with these 8 students. It'll break down towards the date we worked on it, the lesson, the unit, and then it'll say like the literacy skills will have main idea, phonics, and comprehension. And then, so it could extend how long, but that way in the virtual space, I could just look at them. And as we go through the lesson, write in and say, okay, you talked about comprehension. All right, Sammy. All right, let's write this down. All right, oh, great job. And I could continue on with my lesson in order to track it. So I'm not recreating the wheel. Sorry about that. I'm trying to
No, it's like, oh my goodness. I know I've seen data sheets, and it's like my head spins. It's like,
right. But it's just like, but it's gonna be
I would encourage including phonological awareness into your data collection and into your IEPs, because we know that impacts long-term goal.
Right. So that's how I just talked as you were speaking, just breaking it down towards their IEP goals. Say, okay, these are the first things they need to work on.
Okay, so the easiest scaffolding is using your hands. And for the older kids, that's often all we need to do. And it is something doable because they can do it with their hand in their lap once they get to use that same tool to help them spell. They can do that in the lab without being seen. So I really like this, using your a hand as the manipulatives. And if they need more scaffolding, we could go to using actual things that they move. And some students, I understand, really need the tactile. They have to physically move it to show that I'm taking it away and putting it in. You can do the physical scaffolding, physical pieces that you scaffold. You can do the virtual pieces that you move, like we did with the Jamboard the other day. And for those of you who weren't here on Tuesday, that is in Tuesday's lesson. And do you want me to just show the Jamboard again? Who wants me to show a Jamboard again for that? Oh, I know what I should do is I really should show you the Google slide version of it that would not load yesterday. See if I can get that up. But using pieces to manipulate. Yesterday, my Google Drive, and actually when I was reading last night, there were other people having issues too. It was something happening in Google. That there have been issues this last week. Now, it is slow. Maybe it'll come up. Okay, so we can use Google Slides or Jamboard to physically move pieces. It's still being slow, but it's coming up. We can use the physical manipulation. And what I talked about, I don't remember if it was yesterday or Tuesday, is that we have to make sure that the terminology that we're using is familiar to the students. So when we talk about taking something away or substituting, are they familiar with what you're talking about? And so if it's the terminology that's an issue, we have to support the terminology. And the reason I say this is I had a high school student at one point in special ed. And I was saying, okay, what was the first sound you heard in that word? And he was saying something wacky. And or I might have started, what was the last sound you heard? And it's like, he said something wacky. I said, okay, wait. Well, what's the first sound that you heard in that word? And he said something wacky. And it's like, it occurred to me, this was a number of years ago, but it was like, it shocked me. And it's like, oh, he was a high school student, special ed, but still functioning pretty well at a high school level in special ed. He did not know the ordinal numbers of first, second, third. He didn't know what the words meant. So how, which was the first sound or the second sound or the third sound, when he didn't know what first, second, and third meant? So we have to make sure that the terminology we're using is clear to our students. So when we talk about take away a sound, it's like, okay, how do you take away a sound? What does that even mean to take away a sound? So, that's when we might demonstrate with real objects. I'm going to take this one away, what's left? So making sure that our concepts are very clear to our student and using concrete objects to help make sure that that our terminology is clear. So, for that student, I had to line things up in order and like, okay, here's the ice cream truck. And we're going to line these people up and which one is first. This one's the first. He's in the number one position and he's going to be the first one who gets that ice cream. Which one is second and going through that. Okay, so now here are my sounds in my word. Which one is the first one? Which one is the second one? See how they're lined up here? This is the starting point. Because, in a word, when you're speaking, a word is just a whole word. How do you have a starting point? It's just a table. I mean, what's the starting point on table? Right? I mean, we recognize that we're talking about the order that the sounds are in or the order that the letters are in. But to a student where it's like, what do you mean first sound in table? It's just table. So we have to make sure that the terminology we use is clear. So the Google slide up is here. And so I have letter tiles here, and the students can use the letter tiles to build. And this is what I don't like on the Google Slides is that it's a click and drag, and you don't see it actually moving, you just see the box moving, right? And there's a bit of a lag. And right now, things are lagging for me pretty strongly. But so we can use this. We can use letters because letters are more concrete than the sounds themselves. So if we need to, we use the letters. And this is the grid view that I was talking about. In the grid view, this down here, if I'm in grid view and I assign one frame to each student, I can sit there and watch my students work as they're working. I just duplicate the slide as many times as I need for my students and assign the students, and they go and work and I sit back and watch them. I also can do it with just the using the blocks to represent the sounds. So letters is a higher level of scaffolding. Blocks is, using letters is for students who need the most scaffolding. When I say highest, they need most scaffolding. Blocks is more abstract. So if they don't need the letters and they can just work with the sounds, we can work with the blocks. So I go from fingers to blocks, and if that's still not working, then I would go to letters. but I can sit there and watch my students work. So it's being laggy, but have you all used this process? Are you familiar with using grid view to watch your students?
No, I think that this is a good opportunity just to do. I know I think a lot of us, well, I could just only speak for myself, we're new to the virtual space. So it's like trying to teach the kids on the computer and have these other programs. It's, it's eye-opening, but I have not yet.
Okay, so I like using Google Slides, and I'm being really laggy right now. And I think this is what happens when I video and record at the same time. I know this. So if I'm recording it, everything slows down. But when I'm not recording it, it works pretty well. So just very quickly, do you want to just see what this looks like, or no? Just skip it because it is pretty laggy. But so I can see the students work. Lori, do you want to pop in and do one of these for me, and everyone else can just watch you because I know you've done this with me.
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
Can you put it in the chat?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
So, and I use this process not just for working with letters and letter tiles. I'll use this for writing. It's like I'll put each student in his own slide and we'll do writing. I do it for not spelling, because spelling you still get the squiggle marks. But if I'm doing a writing exercise, we will write our words in there. Anyone with the link has access. No sign-in required. Right. I was trying to get the code. I don't know if this is going to happen today while I'm recording the video. It's being wonky. I'll also do this for math work virtually, because I can get this to work. I'm frozen.
Emily, I think now that you've been given these good resources, I just want to let you know I'll be emailing you often, say, hey, I tried this, or hey, I did that. Now I know that you have these ideas. I'm going to be like, hey,
That's fine. That's fine.
I definitely, because sometimes, I have that brain freeze. I'm like, okay, we have Jamboard, we have Pear Deck, we have, and it's like, how do I make it a little bit more accessible, using like a UDL, like a universal design of learning, stuff like that. And in SPED, the kids have these differentiated learning. So it's like, and that's what I was sharing with Allison and other people. It's like, how do I, with these 8 students, make sure they're all on these different tasks, but we're trying to achieve the same goal in this virtual space? So
it is so hard, because when I'm in a classroom, I can look over 12, 15 kids and know what each child is doing. And, they might be working in a group over here, they're doing this over here, and I can kind of hear the different conversations and be okay. And virtually, I am just like 6. Beyond 6, it's like, just mute yourselves.
Right.
Because I can't handle that. It's like with headphones and this, the duplex issue of sounds going back and forth. It's like I cannot keep track of different things going on virtually beyond about 6 kids.
Yeah, it's like when I do have them, it's just like, okay, I need you guys are gonna work on this. This is the meeting. I'll jump over to this breakout room I have with my other one-on-one. It's like, okay, let me jump to the breakout room. Stay here. Don't move. Relax. So Bernie's in my class too, so she hears it. I'm like, okay, because you can visually see this one student or 2 students that aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And it's like, okay, I need you guys to jump on this. But
all right, this might not be working, but in this case, I'll also use this process of using Google Slides to just show the students' work. So if they're working on a whiteboard or they're working on their math page, yeah, it's not happening. It's not happening. Am I still presenting? So let me just go to a different one that might work. So if I had a bunch of students on slides, I would assign each student a slide, and then I'll say, okay, go to your slide and do insert image by camera. And if they have their writing here, and they'll do insert image camera, hold it up to the camera, snap a picture, and boom. And it goes into their slide. So I can see their work. Okay. So slide allows you to even see the written work for your whole class. Allows you to collect when they're home and they're working on their work, and it's like, how am I going to see it? Take a picture, send it to me. Now you've got 85 emails, or you have the 85 things in your inbox in your Google Classroom, or whatever it is, because everyone sent you 12 pictures of their work that they did at home. Sticking it here, then it's in your slide deck. You have one thing to open up and look at. So I do like Google Slides for that. Like that. Okay. Going back to my outline. So phonemic manipulation. We need to teach it. It will help them little bits at a time. Kilpatrick's book, he has 1-minute exercises that you can do a minute here, a minute there. And over time, you do it every day. Over time, you will see vast improvement. So I will tell you, as an OG instructor, I could teach students phonics and I could teach them the rules, and I would still say some kids, they had to decode that word 20, 30, 40 times before it went into their long-term memory. Like, oh yeah, he's going to have to just keep decoding the word, and eventually he'll get it. And what we're seeing now, what the research is showing, is that when you bring up their level of phonemic manipulation to automaticity, they no longer have to decode the word 20, 30, 40 times before they instantly recognize it. It's more like the neurotypical 1 to 4 times. Now, it may still take more than 4 times, but it's a very low number compared to having to decode the word 40 times before it goes into their memory. So it's useful. It is time well spent. It aids in our long-term goal. It's not onerous. You can do it at any point in the day, all day long, a little bit here and a little bit there, and you will find it helpful. So my students, since I learned about this, the big work was published in 2015. So you know how scientists, they have their work that they publish in their journals, but the ones that became available to actual educators was published in 2015. And so I started implementing it shortly after that. And I can tell you the difference it makes for my students is incredible, incredible. So it's still, they still have to learn the phonics. They still have to learn how to decode. They have to learn how to handle multisyllabic words. But the ability to then take what they're learning and place it into long-term memory, just, it's phenomenal. And Kilpatrick shows research that he says, looking at an RTI information, and I don't remember how large his study was, but it was a big study, and it might have been meta-analysis of other studies. But he was saying, okay, you do any RTI and you get this, we all see improvement in reading with whatever the RTI is. They see that. If the RTI includes explicitly taught phonics, instead of this, you see this. Okay? So you see roughly double once you include explicitly taught phonics. But if your RTI or if your whole group instruction includes, but this study was RTI, if it includes explicitly taught phonics and phonemic manipulation skills, you doubled the effect. It was phenomenal. So, and I would say that my experience over the last, just whatever it's been 3 years or so, has bears that out, that it is really effective in producing the goal of improved reading. Okay. So there's books, there's material, we should do it. And if you have questions on how to help or how to incorporate it, like, okay, we're not going to be able to get the book, you can do the same exercises with whatever work you have. So if whatever work you have in your classroom, taking the words and noticing, okay, well, what happens if I change the first sound? What happens if I change this sound or this sound? What happens if I took away the sound? What would the new word be? You'll start seeing those relationships that you could do with words all around you. And you just pop it into your conversation, pop it in, it will help. And then, of course, we assess and say, yes, this child is improving, and you will see an improvement in reading. Okay. I think it's time for a quick just reflection and a quick break. How are we doing here? Yes? No? Any questions? Any comments? Any, I'm lost, I have no idea what to do now? No?
I think it's great. I think you've been doing really, really well. You've answered a lot of my questions, and I think I'll be emailing you, or not. I'll be emailing you, because here we are in reading, and I'm not speaking well, but I will email you.
Okay. Okay. So when we come back, we're going to take a short 5-minute break, get your water, stand, stretch, whatever. We're going to be talking about going into phonics and just a couple of pieces of information about writing versus, whether or not we deal with physical writing versus not physical writing, and then going into phonics. And we will touch on blending and morphology. I'm not sure how much we'll touch on it, and then we will go into more depth tomorrow as well. So I want to make sure that we've touched on those areas, and then we'll practice actually tomorrow we'll have practice where we will put it all together and look at real words, decoding and encoding words. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break. Is 5 minutes enough? Do you need more than 5 minutes? Is that good to stand up, stretch, get water, use the bathroom, whatever? Okay, and when I come back, please remind me to hit record again. We'll come back at 9:36, somewhere around there.